It's on my visiting card sure enough, and it's them that's all a pink satin paper, that any gentleman that pleases may behold the interesting words, Sir Patrick O'Grandison, Baronet, 39 Southampton Row, Russell Square, Parish of Bloomsbury. And should ye be wanting to discover who is the pink of politeness quite, and the lighter of the hot ton in the whole city of London, why it's just myself. And fight, that same is no wonder at all, so be pleased to stop crowing your nose, for every inch of the 6 weeks that I've been a gentleman, and left off with the bog-throgging to take up with the baronessy, it's Patrick that's been living like a holy emperor, and getting the edication and the graces. Och, and wouldn't it be a blessed thing for your spirits if ye could lay your 2 peepers just upon Sir Patrick O'Grandison, Baronet, when he is all ready dressed for the hopperer, or stripping into the brisky for a drive into the Hyde Park. But it's the elegant big figure that I have, for the reason of which all the ladies fall in love with me. Isn't it my own swate self now that'll measure the 6 foot and the 3 inches, more nor that, in me stockings, and that am exceedingly well proportioned all over to match? And is it really more than 3 foot and a bit that there is, anyhow, of the little old foreigner Frenchman that lives just over the way, and that's ogling and a-goggling the whole day, and bad luck to him, at the purty witty Mrs. Thrackle, that's my own next-door neighbour, God bless her, and for the most particular friend and acquaintance. You perceive that the little spalpeen is summat down in the mouth, and wears his little hand in a sling, and it's for that same thing, by your lave, that I'm going to give you a good raison. The truth of the whole matter is just simple enough. For the very first day that I comed from Connaught, and showed my swate little self in the straight of the widdy, who was looking through the windy, it was a gone case altogether with the heart of the purty Mrs. Thrackle. I perceived it, you see, all at once, and no mistake, and that's God's truth. First of all, it was up with the windy in a jiff, and then she threw open her 2 peepers to the itmost, and then it was a little gold spyglass that she clapped tight to one of them. And devil may burn me if it didn't spake to me as plain as a peeper could spake, and says it through the spyglass, Och, the tip of the morning to you, Sir Patrick O'Grandison, Baronet, Marvonine, and it's a nate gentleman that ye are, sure enough, and it's myself and me fortin just that'll be at your service, dear, any time of day at all for the asking. And it's not myself you would have to be bate in the politeness, so I made her a bow that would have broken your heart altogether to behold, and then I pulled off me hat with a flourish, and then I winked at her hard with both eyes, as much as to say, True for you, you sweet little creature, Mrs. Thrackle, me darlint, and I wish I may drowneth dead in a bog, if it's not myself, Sir Patrick O'Grandison, Baronet, that'll make a whole bushel of love to your ladyship, in the twinkling o' the eye of a Londonderry purraty. And it was the next morning, sure, just as I was making up me mind whether it wouldn't be a polite thing to send a bit of writing to the widdy by way of a love letter, when up comed the delivery servant with an elegant card, and he told me that the name on it, for I never could read the copper plate printing on account of being left-handed, was all about Monsieur the Count Auguste Lucchesi, Maître de Danse, and that the hull of the devilish lingo was the spalpeeny long name of the little old foreigner Frenchman as lived over the way. And just with that in comed the little willain himself, and then he made me a broth of a bow, and then he said he had only taken the liberty of doing me the honour of giving me a call, and then he went on to palaver at the great rate, and devil a bit did I comprehend what he would be after the telling me at all, excepting and saving that he said parley-woo, woolly-woo, and told me among the bushel of lies, bad luck to him, that he was mad for the love of Wady Mr. Thrackle, and that my widdy Miss Thrackle had a punching for him. At the hearing of this, ye may swear, though I was as mad as a grasshopper, but I remembered that I was Sir Patrick O'Grandison, Baronet, and that it wasn't altogether gentile to let the anger get the upper hand of the politeness, so I made light of the matter, and kept it dark, and got quite sociable with the little chap, and after a while, what did he do but ask me to go with him to the widdy's, saying he would give me a fashionable introduction to her ladyship. Is it there ye are, said I then to myself, and it's true for you, Patrick, that you're the fortunest mortal in life. We'll soon see now whether it's your swate self, or whether it's little Monsieur Maître de Danse that Mistress Thrackle is head and ears in love with. With that we went off to the widdy's next door, and ye may well say it was an elegant place, so it was. There was a carpet all over the floor, and in one corner there was a 40-penny and a Jew's harp, and the devil knows what else, and in another corner was a sofy, the beautifulest thing in all nature, and sitting on the sofy, sure enough, was the swate little angel, Mistress Thrackle. "The tip of the morning to ye," says I, Mrs. Tracle, and then I made such an elegant obeisance that it would have quite altogether bewildered the brain of ye. "Woolly-woo, parley-woo, plump in the mind," said the little foreigner Frenchman, "and sure, Mrs. Tracle," says he, "that he did. Isn't this gentleman here just His Reverence Sir Patrick O'Grandison, Baronet, and isn't he altogether and entirely the most particular friend and acquaintance that I have in the whole world?" And with that the lady she gets up from the sofy and makes the sweetest curtsy nor I've ever seen, and then down she sits like an angel, and then, by the powers, it was all that little spalpeen Monsieur Maitre des Dames that plumped himself right down by the right side of her. Och hon, I expected the two eyes of me would have comed out of my head on the spot. I was so desperate mad. However, "Bay to," says I, after a while. "Is it there ye are, Monsieur Maitre des Dames?" And so down I plumped on the lift side of her ladyship, to be even with the willing. Botheration, it would have done your heart good to procave the elegant double wink that I gived her just then right in the face with both eyes. But our little Frenchman he never began to suspect me at all, and desperate hard it was he made the love to her ladyship. "Woolly-woo," says he, "parley-woo," says he, "plump in the mud," says he. That's all to no use, Monsieur Frog Mavourneen, thinks I, and I talked as hard and as fast as I could all the while, and thought it was myself that just diverted her ladyship completely and entirely, by reason of the elegant conversation that I kept up with her all about the dear bogs of Connaught. And by she gived me such a sweet smile, from one end of her mouth to the other, that it made me as bold as a pig, and I just took hold of the end of her little finger in the most delicatest manner in nature, looking at her all the while out of the whites of me eyes, and then only procave the cuteness of the sweet angel, for no sooner did she observe that I was after the squeezing of her flipper than she up with it in a jiffy and put it away behind her back, just as much as to say, "Now then, Sir Patrick O'Grandison, there's a bitter chance for ye, Mavourneen, for it's not altogether the gentile thing to be after the squeezing of my flipper right full in the sight of the little foreigner Frenchman, Monsieur Maitre des Dames." With that I gived her a big wink just to say, "Let Sir Patrick alone for the likes o' them tricks," and then I went easy to work, and you'd have died with the diversion to behold how cleverly I slipped my right arm between the back of the sofy in the back of her ladyship, and there, sure enough, I found a sweet little flipper all waiting to say, "The tip of the morning to you, Sir Patrick O'Grandison, Baronet." And wasn't it myself, sure, that just gived it the least little bit of squeeze in the world, all in the way of a commencement, and not to be too rough with her ladyship, and och, botheration, wasn't it the gentlest and delicatest of all little squeezes that I got in return? Blood and thunder, Sir Patrick Mavourneen, thinks I to myself, but it's just the mother's son of you, and nobody else at all. That's the handsomest and the fortinest young big trotter that ever comed out of Connaught. And with that I gived the flipper a big squeeze, and a big squeeze it was, by the powers, that her ladyship give to me back. But it would have split the seven sides of you with the laughing to behold just then, all at once, the conceited behaviour of Monsieur Maitre des Dames. The likes of such a jabbering, and a smirking, and a parley-wooing, as he beginned with her ladyship, never was known before on earth, and devil may burn me if it wasn't me own very two peepers that cotched him tipping her the wink out of one eye. Och hon, if it wasn't myself then that was as mad as a Kilkenny cat, I should like to be told who it was. "Let me inform you, Monsieur Maitre des Dames," I said, as polite as I've ever said, "that it's not the gentile thing at all, and not for the likes of you anyhow, to be after the ogling and a goggling at her ladyship in that fashion." And just with that, such another squeeze as it was, I gived her flipper, all as much as to say, "Isn't it Sir Patrick now, me jewel, that'll be able to protecting o' you, me darling?" And then there came another squeeze back, all by way of the answer. "True for you, Sir Patrick," it said, as plain as ever a squeeze said in the world. "True for you, Sir Patrick Mavourneen, and it's a proper nate gentleman ye are, that's God's truth." And with that she opened her two beautiful peepers till I believed they would have come out of her head altogether and entirely, and she looked first as mad as a cat at Monsieur Frog, and then as smiling as all out of doors at myself. "Then," says he, the willing, "och hon, and a woolly-woo, parley-woo," and then with that he shoved up his two shoulders till the devil the bit of his head was to be discovered, and then he let down the two corners of his purraty trap, and then not a ha'porth more of the satisfaction could I get out of the spalpeen. Believe me, my jewel, it was Sir Patrick that was unreasonable mad then, and the more by token that the Frenchman kept on with his winking at the widdy, and the widdy she kept on with the squeezing of my flipper, as much as to say, "At him again, Sir Patrick O'Grandison, Mavourneen." So I just ripped out with a big oath, and says I, "You little spalpeenny frog of a bog-throtting son of a bloody noun." And just then, what do you think it was that her ladyship did? Troth, she jumped up from the sofa as if she was bit, and made off through the door, while I turned my head round after her in a complete bewilderment and botheration, and followed her with me 2 peepers. You perceive I had the reason of my own for knowing that she couldn't get down the stairs altogether and entirely, for I knew very well that I had hold of her hand, for divil the bit had I ever let it go. And says I, "Isn't it the least little bit of a mistake in the world that ye've been after the making, ye ladyship? Come back now, that's a dollant, and I'll give you your flipper." But off she went down the stairs like a shot, and then I turned around to the little French foreigner. Och hon, if it wasn't his spalpeenny little paw that I had a hold of in my own, why then it wasn't, that's all. And maybe it wasn't myself that just died then outright with the laughing, to behold the little chap, when he found out that it wasn't the lady at all that he had hold of all the time, but only Sir Patrick O'Grandison. The old devil himself never beheld such a long face as he put on. As for Sir Patrick O'Grandison, baronet, it wasn't for the likes of his reverence to be after the minding of the trifle of a mistake. You may just say, though, for it's God's truth, that afore I left hold of the flipper of the spalpeen, which was not till after the ladyship's footman had kicked us both down the stairs, I gave it such a nate little broth of a squeeze as made it all up into a raspberry jam. "Woolly woo," said he, "parley woo," says he, "cot damn." And that's just the truth of the reason why he wears his left hand in a sling.